It's been 2,000 years since the day that my heart stopped beating, and the luster of the moon chalked pale and cold. A heart in stasis buttresses the falling skies and prevaricates the course of life. The cold resonance of the drum caused the space around me to collapse, and I tined by the barriers of temporality thenceforth. For 500 years I waited. For 500 years I waylaid. For 500 years I watched. And for another 500 years I wondered. I wondered what it is that makes a heart beat in the first place. I wondered what force purports to persist, and I wondered over the conditions of cessation. I was interloped in the infirmary of a wayward soul, and as such I became indifferent to the whims of individuals. My awareness traced the tracks of all living minds, and each proffered a porthole into the plethora of possibilities, none of which I could affect, yet all of which I beheld. For some time I considered myself absconded from the actuality of an existence, until summarily I feigned this supposition for the surmisal that I may have been the sum of all collected and connected beings. I was once in body a bastion of beliefs, but by the occlusion of my orientation the requisite was simply rescinded. To see the world with neither emotion nor belief is to see the light marble indistinctly amidst the crevices of continuity, and reflect, resound, and refract amongst the veritable shapes of singularity. Had I the capacity to enjoy beauty, I may have been content aloft the edge of eternity, but instead I mused over the muddled mystery of my nature. I once had a body, flush with blood and appositely operable. I was conscripted to a cause along with my cohorts to comprise an army in the contest of the balance of power. We marched for 40 days over 40 nights. It was a venture that, had I encumbered alone, might amount to a tale in itself, but the capabilities of a group far outweigh the tasks of an individual. On the eve of the embridling battle, our camp was a tremolo of palatable narratives, accounting for the whole excursion. This was their last chance to reinforce the ideals these soldiers would later be called to act upon. Each soldier had a story to explain why he was there, and each tale followed a familiarity forged by neighborhood. Not one man could tell you the names of every other, but each was united under the name of kinship. We were armed with the most formidable weapon an army can carry, the conviction of a morality morphed by the ideological maquette of the mission. The most important preparation for battle is to derive a destiny impervious to defeat, and it didn't once occur to me that our enemy would be doing the same. In any case, they weren't I. They were a distortion of what we perceive to be the ultimatum of universal order, our universal order. A quiet lull later befell the camp that night, in stark contrast to the conflict that awaited the return of the dawn. We were standing in line, facing the devil. The sun fell behind a cloud to admonish its witness, and my sword suddenly felt too heavy for my hand. The horns blew, and our designated heroes led the charge. A hero must be proclaimed to the role, otherwise their distinction from ordinary men is irresolvable. When the front lines met, the cataclysm commenced. A great thunder screamed out of the congregation of sword and armor. The clashing enlightened the shadowed field with bolts of ethereal light emanating from the strikes and reflecting among foes. The shot of artillery whistled overhead and pulled the winds here then there. The bilge of blood rained awash over every face, and I felt my feet sink into the sludging swamp curdling underfoot. Never had one man invoked such mighty turbulence. Only an army could wield such a storm. Unable to move with any agility, I was met with a heavy blow to the head, whereupon I fell unconscious for a short while. When I came to, I could no longer differentiate enemy from brother. The classification was no longer valid. Morality fled with the dead. All I saw were fathers, brothers, and sons, and I drove my sword into all of them indiscriminately, and alas, no God smite me. Anarchy altruistically overtook the amassing sin, and I beheld all was permitted. Never before had I understood freedom as in that moment, and I simultaneously avowed never to uphold it again. Crestfallen, I gave myself to the madness with as little hesitation as I gave myself to the preceding cause. To abstain from the carnage would be the condemnation of one's own identity. The only way we could achieve moral redemption thence was to prevail. Someone would have to survive and return to the motherland a testament of its past. Only then could the causes of continuity be coerced from the conflict, and martyrdom would be our penance. The event careered beyond the control of its commanders. It had to unfold, to be undone. As I had never before been to war, I was unprepared for the forces that overcame us. Men who hadn't theretofore shown themselves to be overtly aggressive struck their enemies with enough ferocity to kill them twice. Those who had so carefully memorized the words of the great poets were so carelessly cleaving to mute their enemies. And those who had loved with gentle hands were killing with callous might. Their passions pervade with their ineluctable intensities, though they had been transmuted across a spectrum of surfacing instincts. A warrior trains his muscles to the movements of combat, but the will to contend was always within him. The body needs to learn to contain the man, for his soul need only be lured out of him. I could no longer hear my own voice in my head. The world had become a swirling cacophony of metallic light and morbid howls. The point of a spear shuddered through my shoulder, and I dropped my sword. A piercing cold surge ruptured my spine and spliced my chest. I dreamt I saw the whole battle from every imbibed perspective, and disenchanted by mortality, I was consigned to the conquering chaos.